welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Your questions and comments are welcome. Hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. And congratulations goes out to our hosts who are celebrating their second year of broadcast anniversary, if I said that right. Congratulations, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you, Gina. That was smooth.
Yeah, that was. I'm a professional.
Yes, you are.
Yes, we are. We are all professional. And yes, it is our the beginning of our second year, or the end of our second year, and beginning of our third year of broadcasting on ArtistFirst Radio Network, which we're now proud to call our home away from home. and you people, you found us. Congratulations. And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And you have found the soul of the Everyman.
Uh-huh.
So pat yourselves on the back and buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to be quite the ride. And tonight's show is actually kind of an interesting one. The topic is finding yourself. Right? You know, people who couldn't find themselves with both hands in a mirror.
Oh, dear.
That's not the kind of finding yourself we're talking about. You know, we're kind of talking about what people are always talking about. You know, it's like I'm going on a I'm going to take a journey and I'm going to find myself.
Oh, the phrase "find myself." Yeah.
You know?
And how many times were you as a child being told that, you know, this is the thing that you've got to do is find who you are.
Exactly. And I think, you know, at some level, we all do want to kind of find ourselves. You want to. Your life is sort of a series of events where you're looking for meaning. You know, you're looking for something that both rewards you and that you have an affinity with, that you find yourself sort of defining your purpose, you know. So part of finding yourself is kind of finding what it is that you're here to do. You know, what work or what what kind of overarching theme is my life going to be defined by?
Or I guess what you're saying is, what is it that defines me?
Well,
that's what people. You know, I'm going out to see what makes me feel good.
Right. Well, or what, you know. I have certain talents. And I have certain, things that I'd like to do. And then there will be life itself, which is very, is going to present you with certain challenges, and you have to see how, what comes of it. What does this do to me? How do I become, the person I, realize my potential? Maybe that's a good way of putting it. How do you kind of realize your potential? And I think those things are good, but they can be also empty. People will say, I made all this money, or I did all these things, and they started to kind of define themselves in the way that the world does, by how much you're worth, or who you've married, or how many letters are after your name, or how many businesses you started, or
Well, it's interesting because the world wants to tell you how to define yourself.
Exactly.
And you cast about for trying to understand or find something to use as a scale or a measure on what your worth or value is. And it's interesting because it turns into worth and value to the society. or or at least the people around you, as opposed to what is your own worth in your own eyes.
Exactly. And we put up this really boss graphic that we found, a quote from a woman by the name of Emily McDowell. And the sentiment that's expressed in that, it's sort of long, but it basically says that of all the things that we just talked about, sort of the external definitions of who you are really not, who you are. And to the extent that you feel sort of to the extent that people come to their kind of middle of their life or their quote-unquote midlife crisis and say, well, I don't know who I am. I have to go find myself,
Well, it was, we discussed in a previous show about obtaining things.
Yeah.
And believing that it's things that will make me happy. And it's things not just physical that you put your hands on, but certain things or goals that were either given to you or you decided, or that society's telling you that this thing is a goal that you should strive for, because this is good. They say that, they tell you that this is good. But if you achieve it, do you feel good?
Exactly.
Where is the fulfillment there? Are you truly fulfilled? And things never fulfill.
Things don't fulfill, and sometimes sort of externally imposed goals and markers and sort of metrics don't fulfill. And when you're young and impressionable or maybe unsure, you can latch on to one of those things. Say, well, that's what I want to be. If I realize this, or I reach this level of success, or work towards this sort of inspiration. I'm going to be just like X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to that point. Maybe it's taking you a long time, and it's taking a lot of effort, and you've realized your goal or your set of goals. But people feel empty sometimes. They say, well, I've done all these things, and I still don't feel as though I'm inside my skin, that I am who I am, that this is what I wanted. It's almost like the having versus the pursuing. Sometimes the pursuit is of something, not having it and trying to get it is sort of belied by the actual having of it. You get there. You've made it to your stated goal. I now own everything in the world, like I'm Jeff Bezos. And I say, well, now I own everything in the world, and I think it can still feel empty. And then people very much say to themselves, well, I have to go find myself. I have to go,
Well, it's interesting because what people tell you to do is make a bucket list.
The bucket list. There you go.
If you write down all the things that you want to do before you kick the bucket, then you'll feel fulfilled.
Talk about just process to desperation.
It's the checklist. And I sit there and I go, okay, so what if you check off everything on your bucket list? Does that mean you can go and die now?
No, I think you have to kill yourself, actually. In fact, it is, I think we've struck upon something there that I just want to pass by too quickly. It is the sense of your own mortality that oftentimes is sort of this impetus or this driver of, well, who am I? Because you get to a certain point in your life, and you say, well, if you have a sort of philosophical bent, you say, well, I can see that I won't be here forever. I'm not this invincible 20-year-old that's going to live forever. Now, what have I done? Who am I? Now that I own everything in the world, or now that I've realized whatever the goal was, quote unquote, it's empty. It's not giving me what I thought it would give me, this kind of sense of identity.
Or fulfillment.
fulfillment.
You know, you've got the biggest bag of marbles in the room. So
Yes. Yes.
okay, that's nice. You know, and it was interesting because it brings to mind a conversation I remember having with a young man when we were in Memorial Sloan Kettering Pediatrics Ward, and he was in his 20s and he had relapsed from a cancer, and he had done everything, and he had been talking about, you know, I had wanted to go to, where was it? There was this one wish that he wanted to do before he died. And he had obviously been thinking of his own mortality. So it was interesting because I think it was the Make-A-Wish Foundation that was fulfilling that wish. And he had gone, I think it was down to the beach or something. He wanted to be with the water, in the water. And I remember, you know, okay, wishing him well. You know, this is what you want to do. Well, when he came back, they were looking at a certain protocol that he was going to try. And he looked at me and he's like, you know, I went down there and I saw the water and I did what was there, and he looked at me like, but it wasn't what I thought it was.
Mm.
So that's when our conversation really started.
You become a seeker, or you realize that the thing that you thought would be the end of your journey, would be your fulfillment, your happiness, is not.
Right.
So in many ways, the quote-unquote finding yourself journey is a journey of piercing illusion. Because the first illusion that you kind of, or the set of illusions that you give yourself is that if I realize whatever these things are, I will be fulfilled and happy and complete. You know, it'll feel wonderful. Whatever lack, because when you're in a state when you don't feel complete, you say, well, I have a lack. And then you try to identify, well, what is it that's missing? What is it that's not me? Why don't I feel happy and fulfilled? I need X, and you identify it, and you have either your bucket list or your whatever it is, you want to own the world. And you get all the way there, and you've done many wonderful things, you know, one very difficult things, and realized this goal. Or you said, well, I'm going to go to this one spot, and this one spot's going to be the goal. And you get there and you realize it's just still incomplete. And that's when you're right. That's when the conversation starts, because what it is that nothing outside of yourself completes yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You started out when you were born and you were a 1 and 2 year old. In fact, when you're a 2-year-old, I think you are a complete person. You are a till of the Hun, and you own the universe, and everything is subject to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if only you were big enough, you could enforce your will. You are a complete, whole, happy person who just isn't big enough to realize it, perhaps. And then the pieces of you that you feel incomplete about are covered up and taken away from you, and actually you're bent and warped into something which feels incomplete. But it's not that you, the person that's 2, who is a whole being and complete, is been fragmented or taken apart or undone. It's that you've been convinced, or at least made to feel that you're incomplete, that you weren't a whole person, that there were pieces missing. You know, it's been imposed upon you, and you've accepted that somehow you weren't complete, that this 2-year-old you that owned the universe and was a till of the Hun needed to be, you know, made into a responsible adult. And that's the part. That's the conversation that you start to have. Is that when you go someplace and you think I'll be complete, you realize that you're still carrying around the incomplete you that you've convinced yourself you are. The journey is not. It's not outside.
Well, it has to do with awareness.
Exactly.
When you're a child, the whole world is magical. You go out there and you just explore, and you know you don't know everything. The incompletion comes in when you want to convince yourself that it's possible to know everything.
Or that it's desirable to know everything.
Well, you feel that this is what you're here for. I'm here to learn how to know everything.
Right. And that in knowing everything, or that's the euphemism, but in doing the thing, you will somehow become greater or more you. And
you would be fulfilled. You will feel fulfilled if you know everything.
Right. But you're basically going from a place of whole completeness and moving yourself into a place of lack, or convincing yourself that you now are in a place of lack. I don't know everything, so therefore I can't be me. Or I don't have everything, so therefore I can't be me.
When you say whole completeness, what do you mean?
The awareness that you are you and you are fine as you.
Okay. You need to define that.
Right. In other words, what you're journeying to get back to is because where you were, the place that was whole and complete, you said, oh, well, that's not whole and complete, or I've been told that that's not whole and complete. I'm going to go somewhere. You're not journeying to yourself. It's not a journey of discovery. It's actually a journey, if you will, away.
Well, the thing is, it's the belief that it is a journey of discovery, and let me show you how you do it. This is the recipe for figuring out who you are.
Exactly.
Okay, and that is what you're doing is you're not putting faith in the life that you are. You're putting faith in the list that someone gave you. Right.
That so this the person that has made you incomplete is yourself, in essence.
Well, you agreed.
Right. You're complicit.
Mm-hmm.
And your energies and your time and all the things that you've convinced yourself need to be expended in order to fulfill and become who you have been told you need to be.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, it takes a great deal of effort to make yourself feel less complete. In other words, you move yourself away from this acceptance of who you are as you are. Your 2-year-old self, which looks on everyone else as a lesser being, who is only here to serve my will. Not that 2-year-olds are the epitome of humanity. They're not, but they're very confident in who they are. They look upon others as just other people out there that I can just, great. You sit down, you put a bunch of 2-year-olds in a room, and they all sit down and start playing. No one says, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, I have this much money, I have that much money, you should be listening to me. No, they are a complete group of human beings who doesn't feel a lack. The amount of effort and time and sort of pushing yourself towards something which you feel will fulfill you is really the amount of effort and time that you spend moving away from that, moving away from the completeness that you were as a self-accepting 2-year-old, instead of being a self-accepting 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 20-year-old, 50-year-old, 100-year-old. You move yourself into, I don't know, I just have to get to owning everything in the world, or I'll never be, I won't make anything of myself. I won't be fulfilled and complete. So it's a ton of effort to get to a place where you now still feel empty.
What is it that allows you to do that? What is it that allows you to take on what you're being told is the way to your fulfillment?
Right. You mean, well, I think we just said, you're complicit. You agree.
Well, what is it that convinces you that this is the way to do it? Because you can't do anything at all unless you agree.
Mm.
You can't be forced into anything unless there is an agreement. It is your free will.
Right. At least from the point of view of, you're convinced that this will be, you're basically convinced that this will be the way to a greater happiness or a greater fulfillment of who I am.
Right. So you sit there and you choose.
Right. And maybe you choose without, because you trust the ones who are telling you that this is what you should do. This is, when you're two or when you're a child and when you're growing older, you look all around you and you say, well, how do I fit into this great world I see all around me? And I see many people doing many things, and some of them might excite me, and some of them might make me feel like I should do them too. But the sacrifice is that you give up the satisfaction of being who you are for the dissatisfaction of not having realized the goal or the thing that you think you want to make you who you think you want to be. It becomes we always talk about the I, the ego, the mental voice. It becomes a mental voice thing which pushes you away and off out of awareness and into bucket lists and acquisitions and things and spinning and all those other things that are sort of the mental you.
Mm-hmm. In essence, what it does when you're doing this is you feel that this is a shortcut to what you want to feel, which is fulfilled.
Happy.
Mm-hmm. So if someone did it this way, well, if I just do what they do, you don't have to break out on your own and explore on your own and experience on your own. You're like, oh, they did it this way, so I'm going to go do that, and then I should have the same result.
That's true. I mean, there's something of a I see what they want. I want that, so I should do what they do and become what they are.
Right. That's the gist of it. That's what growing up. That's a natural progression, because you understand that as a child, there's so many things that you don't know. But to be taught the discernment is something that requires a level of maturity. You've got to be able to engage in the world at a very visceral level first. That's why play is so important.
So, I mean, so people get to this point. They start from what is a whole person, a 2-year-old Attila. They move themselves off into sort of dissatisfied with who they are.
They want to be able to do more, because as a child you feel helpless and you don't want to be helpless anymore.
Helpless and I think
dependent.
Dependent and all those things that but in the process of satisfying this need for independence, you acquire a lot of sort of you move away from your own wholeness and your own happiness, and you get to the point where you think that you've realized what you thought was what would guarantee that. I'm Jeff Bezos, I own the world. Just to get, or I'm Bill Gates and I own the world. You realize your what you thought would be this wonderful goal, and yet there you are, feeling empty, feeling unfulfilled, feeling that you still haven't made or realized this desire. And yes, you can sit there and count your blessings. Of course, you've got all these wonderful things, but you don't have this sort of internal satisfaction. In fact, some people get to this point and they literally find themselves almost in a pit of despair. All these things they say, well, this is just a burden. These are just, this is just running me ragged. I'm less happy now with all these things taking my time and energy and precious life. And again, you get to that point where you realize to yourself that no matter what I have, no matter how many billions or whatever it is, you remember, man, that thou art dust, and to dust you shall return. I'm going to die just like every other person on the planet. And if I die as I am right now, I'm dying in an unhappy state. So why am I unhappy? This big why comes up.
Well, that's why people go off on, well, what is the meaning of life then?
What is the meaning of life? And I think that dissatisfaction, that kind of I've spent all this time and all this effort and pushed myself as hard as I possibly can to get all these things, and I've filled buckets and buckets of bucket lists, and yet I still haven't made it. And they start to wonder why. This huge wonder why comes up. And that's, I think, where the sentiment gets us, is people realize at that point that this wasn't it.
Right.
This was not it. No. I was lied to.
Right. I bought the lie.
I bought the lie, and the lie won. Mm-hmm. And it's you can find people that kind of lose it at that point. They kind of almost go a little bit nuts.
Well, they've only begun. That's when the door opens.
That's exactly it.
You've got to close it completely and realize that this didn't work. And you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, because you get the same result.
But right there, you have to realize something. You have to sit there and stare yourself in the face and say, guess what? This was all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's time to go back to the studio.
No, I'm afraid. All right, let's go back, find something in the studio, and we'll come back and talk more about our dissatisfaction and how we get over that.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the 4th largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lines is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Minette Lauren, author of Race for the Sun. Do you believe in guardian angels? Check out book 1 of my Soul Watcher series. It can be found on Amazon.com or anywhere fine books are sold. Go to www.minettelauren.com, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Past shows are available as podcasts. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, C-Man, and we're back. You found us again. And tonight's show is about finding us. Or finding yourself. And we ended up the last half hour with, in essence, when people have come to the point where they realize that everything they've done is empty, and they have to kind of say at that moment that, man, maybe what I decided to do and how I was going to pursue this goal of finding myself, finding out who I should be, was all wrong. And that's sort of a come to Jesus, existential, gotta be courageous moment, because then you got to say, well, what should I really do?
Mm-hmm. Right. Who am I really?
Who am I really?
And why am I alive?
Why am I alive? If you can't answer that question, the midlife crisis, or this crisis of self, crisis of identity, can be shattering to people. You can see people really go off the rails, and sometimes instead of saying, well, I did it wrong, they say, well, maybe I just haven't done it hard enough. So they go out and have 3 affairs and go drinking and try to buy 5 other companies or turn into Jeff Bezos squared or something. And this can result in a lot of fairly erratic behavior. I mean, we've seen some people like billionaires who own sports teams, getting caught in massage parlors, getting, this is an obvious sort of cry for help. The problem with that moment of realization that maybe you haven't done it all is that you really have to then answer that big question. Well, what should I done? Why am I here? What can I do now? And maybe all I've done is wrong. And those are you have to kind of really almost steel yourself to admit to yourself, it doesn't matter to anybody else, although admit to yourself that you might have been wrong. That's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
Well, brutal honesty.
Brutal honesty
is not exactly what people want. They want to be told a story that's comfortable.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with comfort zones. And the reason why they turn away and look towards lists and goals is because they don't want to admit that living can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
pain of living, you must be courageous to really embrace living, because you're open at that point. And you know that sometimes it's really, really bad, and sometimes it's really, really good. When you begin that journey to embrace life, you've got to open the doors wide to understand that both sides are there, and they're always there. Where do you want to reside? Where do you truly wish to be? Because the normal reaction is to, well, it must mean I need to do more things. What did I miss? Where's my bucket list? What did I miss?
What did I miss? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and that overriding question of missing, I must have missed something because I still feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
Or I still feel empty. And in the head, the logical head says, oh yeah, you missed that. That means that's why you're empty. And it's like, no. You're missing it at a very, very intrinsic, basic level. You've been experiencing life in 2 dimensions only, but your being is much greater than 2. But you've decided that you're only going to live in this logical thinking state. And if I continue to do just that thinking state, I check off all of these things, well, it's full, so therefore it must mean I'm full.
Mm.
And it's like, no, you haven't even asked yourself if what you put on the bucket list is actually an experience that makes your heart full. Because that's what you're doing down here, is taking steps to experience what actually fills your heart. The things don't do it.
Yeah, I think what you end up with, though, at the beginning of that, the end of this first journey, no matter how hard you try, and maybe you'll try several times. So some people run into a wall, and they say, I maybe didn't hit the wall hard enough. So they run into the wall again, and sometimes several times. But they run into the wall enough times, and they reach what's called the end of self. You reach a moment where you say, well, I now realize that the things that I've done aren't me. That everything I've done up to this point, I've reached the end of all that. I've tried as hard as I can, and I'm still not satisfied. I'm still not happy. I've now reached the end of this idea of ego, of I, self. And then you find that there's this vast beyond that you haven't explored, the part that you're talking about, the dimension above the 2, you know. Let's understand that there's a vast part of you which is not in bucket lists or any of the other things that people think are going to fulfill them. And you know, on our graphic from Emily McDowell, she refers to it as returning. You know, returning to yourself is what you're really doing. The true you, which isn't in the 2 dimensions, the part that you kind of flattened out. You went from this vast being. 2-year-olds are vast. They own the universe already. They don't need anybody else. You flatten that 2-year-old down into a responsible, goal-seeking, ego-I adult, and you zip along in this 2 dimensions, doing everything you can, and you're neglecting that vast part of you left behind, in essence. And you finally come to the end of that and realize none of this is working. You finally admitted to yourself that this is just not working. And you've got to uncover or rediscover or return
To yourself.
To your real self.
Returning to yourself doesn't mean that it's a list of things. It doesn't mean that it's what you do, which is what most people think living is. They equate living with doing things. And yes, living is a process, but doing is only a part of it.
Hmm.
You know, as an individual, as a human being, you can think and you can feel, and you can communicate, and you can do. But the core of who you are is being.
Mm.
Can you sit there and be? That's what it means to be comfortable in your skin.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that, you've lost a certain amount of weight and you're fitting in the size you thought you needed, or, you've dyed your hair a certain color or whatever. Being comfortable in your skin means you reside in your core being state, which is something that is so completely human.
Mm.
It means coming to your humanity. And that usually scares people.
It can be scary in the beginning.
But you got to get to the end of what you thought it meant to be human. You thought it meant to be you. Thought it meant to be ego. It's discovering that your ego was that set of requirements that you thought you had to meet. And you decided that that's what you thought you had to meet. But when you met those requirements and defined your ego that way, the internal state of satisfaction and fulfillment was not there, because your being state has been shunted aside.
Mm.
And that's when you sit there and go, okay, I misunderstood.
You starved your being and fed and fattened your doing. Your human doing is all done out.
Or your human thinking. I mean, some people all they do is think.
Well, by it, I mean your human running around in tight circles, thinking and doing and defining everything by thinking and doing and doing and thinking about doing and doing about thinking, means that you've starved and neglected and buried and ignored your heart, your being state.
Mm-hmm. And being is more than just emotions, too, by the way.
Oh, no, yeah.
Well, it's just that sometimes most people equate the being state with, well, what state do I happen to be in? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I happy? And it's like, no, those are emotions.
And they're also very ego-oriented, those emotions.
But it's also understanding that you're more than your emotions.
Yeah.
So much more. You're more than you're being reactive to.
Yes. I mean, we talked about this at some point in another show, where, in essence, the vast being, which is all of us, the connection to the eternal, the connection to the vastness of what we share amongst all of us individually and collectively, human being state, is intersecting this plane of mental, of doing here, of living here, of bucket lists and all those things, like a slice through a sphere, to give a very rough analogy. But if you live entirely, you put your entire effort and focus here, spinning in this small circle, and neglect, starve, and leave dark and unfulfilled that vast part of you, which is the being part of you, the vast part of you, this is where your lack comes in. You get to the point where you have completely colored in the circle. Every line is full of your paint-by-numbers diagram, which is what you thought your whole life was. And yet, no matter what, you've done everything you possibly can do, and your life is still ending, and you still feel unfulfilled because you've, maybe through fear, maybe through just ignorance, maybe just because you thought you didn't need to do it, you've left this vast part of you unfed, empty.
Well, the being that you are is vast. And the truth of the matter is what's that emptiness comes from not being able to dimensionalize that plane of existence, that two-dimensional plane of existence that you decided that you were going to live. You're supposed to actually expand that consciousness into 3, 4, 5 dimensions. And that two-dimensional state, that limited state, I think the analogy that we had was you as a being, you are vast. And the existence, this plane is a plane of existence going infinitely in 2 directions. And when you interact with this plane of existence, it's like putting your finger onto a tabletop. And that fingerprint of yours is the intersection of your being with the world, the two-dimensional world that you want to interact in. The trick is to be able to bring more of you into that plane. Expand it from just a tabletop into much, much more. But that's a frightening thought, usually, for most people.
Well, I think certainly there's some fear in keeping people from, but there's a longing there too, Margaret. I think that's why we get to this point where we're dissatisfied with what we think we've done, what we think was going to fulfill us. The illusion, the lie is that this is all there is. That the tiny circle, the fingerprint, is everything, and that once you've completely occupied the fingerprint or completely occupied this tiny circle, that you will have won and done it all. That's what a bucket list really is that, as long as you completely do everything on that list, and it's this, undefined and infinite list.
But the interesting point about that is that everyone says, go out there and make your mark in the world, do something that will make you live forever.
Live forever, yes.
Okay, and if you look at that plane of existence as infinite in 2 directions, what they're basically saying is that, you're making a mark on the canvas somewhere, and then, look, there's your mark right there.
Right.
And you're sitting there going, well, that was nice. We've made a very beautiful painting or work of art, but who are you?
Yeah.
Not the mark that you've made. You're more than that.
Yeah, exactly true. Your dirty fingerprints or your beautiful artwork or whatever it is, it does reflect the vastness of you, but there's no way that anyone could say that a painting is a person or that a painting was all of you, or even every painting you ever made and every word you ever said and everything you ever did was all of you. Because were that the case, and all you would have to do to reconstruct a person would be take everything they ever did and said and jumble it around and swish it a couple times, and there they would be. But it's not the person. The whole part of them that is missing, these are just fragments, scintillas, instants in time, beautiful, beautiful things that somebody did or said, an instant in time that reflects them. But what is it reflecting? It's reflecting this vast being. And realizing that that's where you need to be, and that these things that you do are just little flakes of wonderfulness that you're able to put into existence.
They are pieces of creation that you helped or participated in. Those are pieces of creation, but it's not you.
Exactly. So our bucket lists and our achievements and all the things that we do here are important. They're important because they reflect a vast wonder, which is each one of us. But if you try to cram the vast wonder into this little flake of wonderfulness, of reflection, It's like trying to say that a mirror that you look at holds all of you. Well, it's not you. It's just the tiniest little bit of you.
Right.
And were somebody to say, well, I miss that person, and you were to hand them, well, here's a photograph of them. There. Now, do you feel better? Well, no, it's just a photograph of them. Yes, it's a lovely photograph of who you were for an instant in time, the way you looked then. But the vast you, the being of you, which is vast, even if you just look at your life, every aspect of you, even in just this temporal life, is uncapturable by the tiny fragments which people can take away. The book you wrote, the painting you made, the dirty fingerprint on something. That's not all you. Well, that's why it's unfulfilling. Because even if you line up everything you ever did, from the first scrawl that you made out of macaroni and put together for Mom, to the incredible, intricate, wonder work that you made at the end of your life, it's still not you.
Yeah.
It's just not you. It's a tiny piece of something that you helped create. Exactly.
And people are always casting about to find people that agree with what they think or feel. And those are the reflections. They keep looking for reflections of who they think they are. But it never fulfills.
Yes.
It distracts, but it never fulfills. And it's, again, a checklist, like, well, okay, I think I'm this way, so this person is reflecting back the vibe that I think I am, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, well, what about the part of you that is past all that creation part, the part of you that actually is living, seeing, taking in and acknowledging, exploring? What about the part that finds a moment of beauty that is eternal and appreciates it? Or a moment of complete and utter sadness and still find the beauty in that? Part of you that understands that being human is not what you do or what you create, and not the things that happen to you. There's so much more than that. That's the journey. You have to cast off from what you thought you knew, that the wharf that you made where you think it's all out.
I think what it is like we said in the beginning of this, Margaret, is that this is a false journey, because we've kind of convinced ourselves that we've moved away, that we've moved ourselves into a place, into a space, into a thing, into a time. And all those are again, on this tiny two-dimensional plane, all those reflections, all those, achievements, all those goals. And they're really, when you finally turn it upside down and you realize that these are just reflections, they're just so much glittery dust, that you've been spending a lot of energy and time moving the pieces around, but not realizing that what's doing the moving, or what is the vast part of you, which is you, the being part of you, which is you. So you finally reach the end of this, you finally realize that this isn't ever going to fulfill you unless you come back in and say that it's all good, that we are already fulfilled, that this is the being that I am was telling itself it was unfulfilled, telling itself that it would be satisfied and fulfilled if it did these things. In essence, putting yourself into a space where it was completely impossible to become fulfilled, ever, and convincing yourself that somehow if you did it all right, it would be fulfilling.
And the danger, of course, is that you want to cling to that way of interacting with life, and there is no fulfillment there. There's only emptiness and death. And to realize that you're more than that.
Well,
It's returning to yourself. Return to who you are. It's you know that story in the Bible of the two brothers, and it's the prodigal son story, where he goes to the father and is like, "Give me my inheritance," and his dad gives him everything, and he goes off to the big city, spends the whole thing on all kinds of debauchery and everything that he ever wanted to do, he did, until there was nothing left. And then he found that the only way he could eat is by eating with the hogs. He realized at that point that he wasn't all that money that he spent and all those experiences that he had. He thought that that was the high life. That was the ultimate. He sat there and came to himself and said, "Wait a minute. You know, my father's house, they have plenty to eat. There was no problem there. And I'm starving here, wanting to eat the stuff that the pigs are eating. I know what I'll do. I'll return home to my father and ask him to take me in as a servant, because even as a servant, we are taken care of." But he goes home. And he sees his dad, and he's ready with the speech. "You know, I did you wrong, Dad, and I know I don't deserve to be here, but if you could take me in, I will be your servant." And the father's like, "What, are you kidding? You are my son." And returns him back to full status as son because of the love. That incredible love that will break down all barriers and bring you home to yourself. You are so much more than your situation.
It's exactly the right object lesson. In essence, he reached the end of that two-dimensional plane, did everything, spent all the money. His repentance was still in the two-dimensional plane, still in the comfort zone. You know, I'll just go back. I'll
negotiate with my dad.
Right. And love is the being. Love is the outside of all. It doesn't. In other words, nothing you could do, none of the things that you could do, all your bucket list, doesn't change who you be. You be my son. You be a human being. Even if you've convinced yourself that you're a do.
Right.
So it's going back. It's uncovering.
Yeah. It is returning to yourself. And I believe we've reached the end of our hour.
Returned.
And we have returned to a beginning.
To our beginning. Oh my gosh, it's like kismet of some kind. Anyway, yes, this is the Soul of the Everyman, and we have reached the end of the program. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret, and thank you.
And go find yourself.